Hey guys, today we're going to talk about how to solve systems of linear equations by elimination. And the idea here is to eliminate either the x term or the y term from the two equations. And to eliminate, you want to have opposites, because if you have a 4x and a negative 4x, that's going to cancel. In other words, it's going to eliminate. And so what we want is we want to make sure that we have opposite terms. One's positive and one's negative and the numbers are the same. Because if we have that, we can eliminate that variable, leaving either the x or the y so we can solve it. So you can have opposite x terms or you can have opposite y terms. But that's our goal. And to make opposites, sometimes you already have opposites, and sometimes you'd have to make them by multiplying one of the equations or both of your equations. So we're just going to jump into some examples. And so we'll start off with the easy kind, and then we'll kind of go through into some more difficult. They're not really difficult, but just some more difficult problems. All right, so here's a system of linear equations. And another thing you want to know is if they're lined up in both in standard form. So it's really helpful if both equations are in what's called standard form, ax plus by equals c. If they're both in standard form, then you're going to have an easier chance of eliminating. If they're not in standard form, then I would choose a different method like substitution or graphing. So if you noticed on this first example, they're both in standard form. And so now I want to kind of look around and see if I have any opposite terms. And if you notice, your y's are opposite. One's a positive and one's a negative, and they both have a 1 in the front. So those are called opposite terms. So if you already have opposites, you're going to add the two equations. Okay, so if you have opposite terms, you're going to add. So we're going to add when we have opposites, because that will eliminate the variable. So what is x plus x? 2x. Negative y plus y, that's going to cancel. Equals 1 plus 3 is 4. Now to solve this, you're going to divide by 2, and so x equals 2. And just like with substitution, we're not done. I need to figure out the other half of my ordered pair. So to do that, you would take your answer and you can plug it in either the top equation or you can plug it into the bottom equation. It does not matter. So I'm just going to plug it into the top equation. That's usually where I go, but it does not matter. So I'm going to replace the x with a 2. So I've got 2 minus y equals 1. And of course, you notice I kept my y variable because you want to plug it into the original equation, not after you've crossed out your y's. All right, so to solve this, I can subtract my 2. So I have negative 1y equals negative 1. Divide by negative 1, and you get y equals 1. So your answer, remember, just like before, you want to write your answer as an ordered pair. So x comma y. So again, if you already have opposites, you're going to add the two equations. So if you have opposites, you're going to add the two equations. Well, what happens if you don't have opposites? Well, let's take a look at example number 2. Say I have x plus 4y equals 11, and I have x minus 6y equals 11. So I have terms that are the same, but they're not opposites. So if you take a look, I have the x terms are exactly the same. I don't have any opposites. So how do I make them opposites? Some teachers will tell you to multiply by negative 1. Some teachers will tell you to subtract. It's just a preference. It doesn't really matter. But in this case, if I want to subtract my two equations, I got to remember I put parentheses, and that's where some students just mess up and they forget that they have to subtract, especially when you have this subtracting with this negative 6 here. So subtracting negative 6, most students will mess that up. And so it might be easiest just to multiply by a negative 1. Okay, so if you need opposites and you're so super close, they're exactly the same, you can multiply by a negative 1. And that's the same thing as subtracting that bottom equation, okay? So if I were to multiply this bottom equation by -1, so that would make that x negative. -6 times -1 turns that into a positive, and my 11 times -1 would make that a negative. Okay, so if you have to make opposites, make sure you change everything on that bottom row to the opposite, not just what you need. So now that I have done that, now I can add my two equations together. So you multiply by -1 first, and then you can add because you have opposites. Remember, anytime you have opposites, go ahead and add. All right, so x plus -x cancels. 4y plus 6y is 10y. 11 plus a -11 is 0. Divide by 10 and you get 0. Okay, and I'm going to plug this into my top equation. It does not matter which equation you go to, but I figured I messed up my bottom one there by changing all my signs. It might be just safer to go to the top equation. So now I've got x plus 4 times 0 equals 11. So x plus 0 equals 11. My x is 11. So my answer is 11, 0. All right, so if you don't have opposites, but you're super close because they're exactly the same, multiply by -1, and then you'll have opposites. What do you do if you have opposites? You add. So if you have opposites, remember to add your equations. And so the idea here is you want to make opposites. Sometimes you can make opposites by multiplying by -1. Sometimes you got to do a little more work. Let's take a look at another example where I have to do a little more work to make my opposites. For example, we have 2x plus 3y equals 6, x plus 2y equals 5. So again, they're both in standard form. My x's are on top of each other, my y's are on top of each other. It is looking pretty good. However, I don't have opposites. I have a 2x and an x, and I have a 3y and a 2y. So how could I make opposites? What can I multiply? So if you don't have opposites, you want to make opposites. How do we make opposites? You can multiply. So multiply one or both of your equations to make opposites. All right, so it looks like I can multiply that bottom equation by a -2. What happens if I multiply that bottom equation by -2? That's right, it's going to make my x terms opposites, and that's what I want. So this gives me a -2x minus 4y, because you notice I'm distributing, equals -10. So if you take a look, I can actually get rid of this middle equation now. And if you can see your opposites, you've got opposites in your 2x and your -2x. So I can now add my equations. And when I add, my 2x and my -2x cancel. 3y plus -4y is -1y equals 6 plus -10 is -4. Solve it by dividing by -1, so y equals 4. Are you done? Nope. I'm going to take this and plug it into my top equation. So that's a y equals 4, so I'm going to replace the y with the 4. Make sure you always remember which variable you're plugging into. And also make sure your x's look like x's and your y's look like y's. If not, if your x's and your y's kind of look the same, then you might plug it in for the wrong letter. Neatness counts, I guess. All right, 3 times 4 is 12. Subtract 12, 2x equals -6. Divide by 2, so x equals -3. My answer would be -3, 4. All right. So just make sure you have opposites. Sometimes they're already done and they're staring at you, and you can go ahead and add your equations like this first example. Sometimes they're super, super close to being opposite, so you just multiply by a -1. You can do that to the top or the bottom equation. It doesn't matter. I usually just do it to the bottom. And then you have an equation where you had to multiply to make opposites. In this case, I could just multiply the bottom by -2 to make my opposite terms. And that should be about it. Sometimes you have to multiply both the equations. Those are rare cases, but that does happen every once in a while. Just let me know if you guys have any questions. And again, on your Delta Math assignment, you must show your work to get credit. If you don't show your work or you show work for some other problems and it's not the ones you did, you will not get credit for it. All right, let me know if you guys have questions. Bye.